Almost ready. Hello. Hello. Hi. That was music courtesy of Louis Zong off his website. Hello. It's Monday stream time, and here we all are. How is my one concurrent viewer? Sounds great. So let's see. This will be an interesting one, because I'm gonna have to, if I'm gonna talk, I'm gonna have to adjust my levels in between talking and playing this thing. So that'll be fun to figure out. Let me go ahead and get on the stream on my other computer as well, just so I can take a look at chat or anything that happens to come up. But yeah, today we're gonna kind of just go through some things that I've been working on recently, pieces, technique, and some writing things that I've been getting up to as well. Looking forward for Thursday's stream. We have the turn of the new month coming up, May the 1st. And so I'm going to do a little bit of talking about May Day and some brief, I'm not an expert, but I'll try to give a little brief rundown of some events in labor rights history and sort of the significance of the day of May 1st, as well as highlight some various actions that are going to be happening around the time. As you know, rent is due on the 1st, and many people are without any income. So there has been lots of rumblings of various kinds of collective action and lots of examples of that recently, and I want to take that stream to talk about some of that, as well as some updates as we gotten today about the election, the primary, that I will leave for then. Also, I have been putting some of my tax return to use, and I've ordered some video recording equipment, and hopefully I'm going to start getting into actually producing and putting out regular videos of various topics on here, as well as, music and things like that. I'm going to probably start looking into getting more I'm at least going to get new microphone stands, because the ones I have been sort of failing for the past few years. So I would like to replace those and possibly get like a lav mic for stuff like this, so I can have a couple different sources. I mean, I have other microphones that I could be using. I could set up a dynamic that I'm going to play into and talk into, which now I'm just thinking about it, maybe I should have tried that for the stream, but that'll be for next time. So I'm just going to I've played a little bit today already, like very little, like maybe 10-15 minutes. So I'm going to do a little bit more, some of the fundamental stuff that I might start my day with, and then move into some of the rep things that I've been getting into lately. And I'm kind of just going to do that. Thankfully it's a little cooler today, but I've closed my door, and I live in the hottest room in the house, and the sun hits it like all day directly, and it's very stuffy. So I'm basically just going to go until it's unbearable, and my tuning is all whack, which is, it's going to be starting pretty soon actually. So I'll kind of get into it. So usually I'll start with some kind of long tone thing. I usually do the Caruso 6-note, which is what I've done today, but also this week a couple of times I've done long tones, how I have kind of been doing them for like a decade. When I was in high school and all I knew what to practice was long tones, I would sit there and I would just play the note for as long as I could hold it out, and I can't remember when, like, getting a drone like on your phone or whatever was like an easy thing to do, but once that was pretty doable, I started playing along with the drone, and that was kind of my ear work and tuning work, and really opening up my sound. So I've done that a couple days this week, and then I'll do a couple Caruso, really simple Caruso variations, not really getting outside of the mid-range of the instrument, and then I've been following that up with the Chickowitz flow steadies. I spent a long time, I was doing the variation where, let me just demonstrate really quick. I'm going to move my microphone around. And then I'll go down but also expand. And like I totally stole that variation. But right now I'm just going to go through sort of like the standard, what I've been doing. I'm sticking to like B flat, as we many of us are most likely used to. So I've got tonal energy on my phone, and what I'll do is I will set the sound. I mean, this probably looks terrible. I'll set the sound to sustain, and I'll just sustain, it's like a B flat power chord, B flat and F, and I'll set my metronome at 60 BPM. No, not like that. There we go. And as I do this, I'm focusing on my inhalation. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of my thoughts and how I sort of record that, my practice thoughts. So my focus is on the inhalation, my sound moving through the note changes, and just sort of a sense of relaxation and flow as I ascend through the exercise and I expand the range. So I'm probably going to just play through it and not talk too much, since having to go back and forth is kind of annoying. So I'll just go through. what I'll normally do. All right, you can feel the temperature creeping up. Cool. So it actually feels pretty good today. That didn't feel particularly difficult or taxing or anything. It felt pretty smooth, pretty easy. I mean, there are a few blips here and there, and then some tuning things that I'm sort of working through. I actually got, so the trumpet I'm playing on right now is a Powell S2. It is reportedly a custom horn. I've taken this horn to several people and I've talked to people about it, and nobody have really heard of Powell trumpets. As far as I know, they people know them as flute makers. But I was able to start playing this like in January, and I had to play it for a tour in February. And I've kind of figured it out, at least with this mouthpiece and horn configuration. And I'm also getting back into, I had to, so before this all started, my primary horn is this Adams B flat. It's the Adams A1. Also, people, when I first got the horn like 4 years ago, like Adams, they make drums. They actually make really nice brass instruments. Like if one day I can get an Adams flugel, if I have a reason to get an Adams flugel, I will. But I was playing on this mouthpiece that was given to me when I was in college, and I just wore through the plating, the silver plating on it, so it's just raw brass on my lips, and it was starting to like jack me up. So I was like, why don't I just order the same mouthpiece and then I'll replate the one that I like, because I felt like it was I don't have a ton of gear, I don't have a ton of mouthpieces and stuff like that. I have a number of horns right now, I guess, but I'm not particularly like a gearhead or anything like that. But anyway, yeah, so I bought basically the same mouthpiece, and I plan on replaying the other one. I plan on replaying the other one at some point. Maybe I still can at this point. I'll just have to send it in. But for especially particularly as I mentioned, kind of figuring out different instruments and trying to getting used to other configurations that I've gotten accustomed to, may moved away from. So I am working on writing. I was just some for fun, just like some really intense 4 trumpet like horn lines, and for recording purposes, I always find if you're gonna record the same player to overdub for multiple parts, like if you're gonna have one person play 4 trumpet parts, you're gonna do everything you can to make each of those parts sound like a different trumpet player played it, not in terms of style and stuff like that, but in terms of tone, even if it's just subtle, because when you double up the exact same player on the exact same equipment in a recording, it just sounds so wrong. It just doesn't blend right like 2 actual different players would. So I mess with my mic positions, and I play on different equipment and stuff like that. So that's part of it. Part of it is just because I play different stuff on different equipment for different reasons. But anyway, so the Chicowitz, maybe I'll talk about. So for me, like that kind of thing is not really like, I know people talk about like, you have to delineate between, an actual warm up and a routine and practice and things like that, which I think is important. for me, like what I consider my warm up in the first part, what I do, sometimes it bleeds into practice, but honestly, it's just like warm up for me is it's not always like necessary. I always do, and I always feel like I have to if I wanna be consistent and put out a good product and stuff like that. But it's really just a way for me to feel good and also check where I'm at and do what I need to do in order to accomplish whatever is put in front of me on any given day. Um, so that the Chickowitz is really just kind of like it's like getting in a deep stretch before you go for like a long run or something like that. It's just like I'm feeling it out. I'm feeling how my muscles feel and everything like that. I'm trying to get myself relaxed and loose and just kind of like leaning on my air and feeling good about that. But I also want to mention sort of like the way I take notes about my practice process. Um, I currently don't do any kind of thing where I'm like have like a journal where it's like April 27th at 4 p.m. I practiced Chickowitz or I played Chickowitz for like 8 minutes and I got up to a D or something like that. Or I did double tonguing, uh, Arbin's third double tonguing exercise at 100 BPM or something like that for 10 minutes. I think that's very helpful. I just never been particularly that organized, although I'm trying to steer towards that because I think it could definitely uh, make much more effective use of your time. But what I do for my practice notes is generally like if I discover something or if I find something that helps to think about, then I'll write that down. So for example, I was just playing the Chickowitz, so I wrote in my notes, flow study discovery, air through the final 16th, allow the compression to take you into the upper register. Dash, it is the tongue that creates the speed. Pass that break around the E. Stay relaxed in the chest and throat and play with ease above the staff. So that's just kind of like a language that makes sense to me, like a shorthand. Like I know what I mean by play air through the final 16th. It's kind of like the play from through the note you're currently at into the next note. And thinking about it in terms of rhythm, that's why I had the metronome going. That kind of helps me. And just something that I was sort of messing with is like, you know, trying to place everything when you're moving throughout the register so that it doesn't feel like everything is so far apart. So I was just kind of thinking of like, okay, if I'm starting G in the staff, everything up until like the E is almost like the exact same note. At least that's what it should feel like to me. And then there's sort of that break around the E in the staff that happens on pretty much every trumpet. Like I've noticed, no matter what key it's in, or make or model or whatever, there's that weird break around E, and I find that like something that I've been thinking about since I saw this like master class that Jens Lindemann was doing at some college, where like once you get above the E, everything in your face should basically stay the same, and it's really just like your tongue position and airspeed. Um, I don't necessarily like ascribe to that 100% personally, like as for what I do, but I try to think about that and try not to have too much variation, like I'm changing too much when I start going above that. So for me, going from the, let me just, so so for that playing that third and going through that break, I'm trying to keep the air really um, in terms of what everything else in my body is pretty much the same, my face pretty much the same, and just allowing the tongue to change that airspeed, and then sort of like from the G to the C, kind of also keeping it similar, like in the middle of the staff. The G and the C, I mean, physically, those notes are even closer than they are in the staff when you get above the staff. So trying to like stay relaxed. I've been getting into this mode of like trying to make the compression And if I let it get away from me, then I start letting tension into my chest and my neck. So I just kind of wrote that to remind myself that. So when I make notes, it's not always like this completely brand new revelation that I've never thought of or I've never heard about before. It's just kind of like, the way you think about things and the way you kind of do things are going to change. So I just kind of update my thinking or my whatever I have to sort of remind myself, even if it's just a basic fundamental thing that I should know. Maybe it's gotten away from me, or maybe I need to think about it a little bit differently because of other things that I'm doing a little different. Anyway, and then usually at that point, once I've done like the long tones and then the flow steady thing, like my warm up is kind of. Oh, I also did some of the Clark like chromatic triplet thing earlier, because I've been really trying to get my fingers have never really been my strong suit. The coordination between my fingers and my tongue especially has kind of been always been one of the weaker parts I felt of my playing. So I've been trying to incorporate stuff to improve that, and also connect that with the sort of Chickowitz kind of connecting phrases and writing the air and playing through the notes and stuff like that, all connecting all those concepts. So at this point I might do like flexibility, or I might do like an articulation thing. I think today I'm going to do some a little bit of articulation stuff first. So what I've been doing, my routine is kind of like shifting a little bit. I was kind of in a groove for a couple weeks, but then I kind of like my physical space changed, so now I'm kind of like thinking about different things, and so like I'm working on different things. So but I'll do the exercise that I was doing. I can't remember what tempo I was doing it at, but I'll do it at a fairly safe tempo. Or no, I'll just do what I would probably do, I guess. So I do basically the Clark, the sort of thirds kind of exercise. You know, I'll do that slurred and then tongued to sort of really do a side by side of fingers and air, and then fingers and air and tongue, and just kind of like as well. I've been recording myself a lot when I'm doing these practice things, and just kind of like seeing, like putting a microscope to where those things aren't lining up. As well, like, so the horn, the POW, it's funny because on my Atoms, whenever I've had other people play it, they always say like the valves don't feel so great. They go down pretty easily. The valve stems are relatively short, but the spring is not super bouncy, so it kind of takes longer than, say, if you play in a Bach, you're probably used to it springing back a little easier, a little faster. So it hasn't been the easiest horn necessarily in terms of fingers, but the POW is even it's like the spring action is pretty good, but the valve stems are so long, so it still takes a minute for them to come back up, and it takes a lot to press them all the way down. So doing these kind of like the Clark kind of thing has been just sort of me, it's just I have to get used to making it happen on this horn, just because it's just not it's just more difficult than other horns that I have. So I'm gonna play through that a little bit. You'll kind of get an idea of how I do the how I do it. It's pretty a lot of my exercise that I do, probably from the marching band basis, is just a lot of like doing a thing and then bringing it down a half step, So without further ado. As the stream goes on, the pitch is just going to keep going up and up. And even that is a pretty tame tempo, but it takes me, I kind of have to do this in order to get my fingers locked in on this horn, just because it's so different from my other horns. Woo! I'm sweating. And might as well finish it out. Oh. Shit. Okay, I'm gonna take every opportunity to talk about how hot it is getting. Then we'll get to the point where you can see my visible sweat from my tablet camera. So yeah, that is super hard on that horn. For me, I need to find some things to work out. It just happens that a bunch of the things that I'm, in terms of rep, the things I'm looking at, don't necessarily do too much with fast articulation and finger stuff below the staff, which is particularly and it's interesting. The POW, I find it very easy to do certain things and very difficult to do others. It's a fairly heavy horn. Like my Adams is a pretty lightweight horn, and I'm playing on a bigger mouthpiece than I do on the Adams, but it still feels more difficult to get a lot of clarity in the lower register. So I needed to think of something that that I can kind of use to focus on that. And you see me like stopping in the middle of like doing this one exercise to do some other things. I'm just kind of reminding myself to where the true like articulation lies, and I'm not just doing something weird to compensate for something else. So if I can make it feel as similar to that G in the staff as possible, I want to do that because that's sort of like home base for me. So that's what I'm kind of trying to do there. But yeah, I'll do that. That didn't feel. It's been like a week or so since I've done that, so that might be something I'll do more of. I'm trying to think of some other things I can sort of fold in to address some other issues that sort of overlap some of the things that exercise might highlight, while sort of remaining focused on things that I'm trying to record and get out there in a certain time frame or whatever. There's that. And then something I just started, and then I can actually even show you. So I mentioned Chikowitz, and I've been looking through this like exercise book that is not. It doesn't appear to be like written. Oh, it's not like it's something that is expressly written by him, but possibly compiled by former students and things like that. And it goes beyond the, you know, into a little more elaborate phrases. But I've been just kind of looking through the book and trying to find things because so I on the Powell, I'm primarily using this Carl Hammond mouthpiece, which I got my last year of drum corps, and I use it on my C as well, or I've been using it on my C. It's kind of all my mouthpieces I use are somewhat comparable to 3C. This is like a 3C, except like certain things are bigger. Like it's the 3 rim, the cup is slightly deeper and it's a little more open and things like that. And I have here this Eric Miyashiro Toot, the jazz mouthpiece, which I use as a piccolo / lead mouthpiece, although I really haven't done much lead playing since college. So I'm trying to kind of adapt myself to this again for some things that I'm working on. So really what I'm looking for with these Chikowitz exercises is something that's just kind of reminds my body to let the shallower mouthpiece do some of the work for me, while also just kind of like keying into some of the particular things I have to do to coordinate moving through registers. So that I find that like when I play shallower mouthpieces, when I'm playing lead stuff, like I have to, like if I eat, sleep, breathe, that kind of thing, I can get used to it. But if it's just something that I'm like trying to work on to the next to other things, then it takes a little more work to get through. But I find that like obviously lead stuff, you're trying to figure it out, like you want to do things as efficiently as possible, but it's also very easy to get beat up doing it. So that's why these days I don't spend too much time on it. I kind of just let my range build along with, you know, my general like strength and endurance and just sort of relaxation and efficiency on the instrument, versus like I'm really trying to get like those high notes to really speak and really just become super comfortable in that living in that register. But there's just a lot of little particulars of coordination that I kind of just need to feel out. Is kind of what works for me. So with that in mind, let me pick one of these exercises that I was playing through. Yeah, why don't I do this page? I'm gonna go ahead and put my screen up on the stream. Let's see. So you can see here this PDF of these exercises, and I played this one the other day. I liked it. It like just kind of feels and sounds good, and that is sort of my goal for what I want out of this particular exercise. So let me go ahead and adjust the levels and play through some of this and see how I'm feeling today. Hold on. It's hard to tell how much of the tuning is the difference in changing mouthpieces versus the difference in changing temperature, but and that's about where so I can usually work up to, like an F or a G without too much issue. It won't sound like screaming and amazing up there. But usually I can get it, Um, but particularly with the shallower mouthpieces, just kind of getting used to how you have to work with the extra compression that it gives you. It's kind of easy to sort of or overshoot as you're making these adjustments. So something like this, I'm not sure exactly how you're supposed to phrase this exercise or what it's supposed to be for, but I'm kind of doing what feels normal or natural, phrasing out that way, and then inhaling and then re-coming in after those quarter notes. In a way, it both allows me to sort of stretch out through these different registers while also kind of like teaching myself like the correct airflow. If I'm coming in from an inhale to the exhale, what do I have to do with my tongue and how I'm creating this compression in order to cleanly come in and make it sound like I'm continuing through this larger phrase, even though I'm taking a breath there. So yeah, I kind of like this one. So Ooh. Woo! I'll change the mode there. Might just go through that one again, slightly slower actually, since that one was clearly a little rougher than the other one. So let me just try that. I don't know. I don't know why I keep trying to change the key. Hold on. Okay. Um. Whoops. Yeah. I could hammer out the little weird blips and blops. But I think there's a sort of diminishing marginal returns for something like that. When you're getting up there, personally. So for me, if I'm doing something like that, um, that's sort of a thing that's like, it's not like the easiest thing in the world, obviously, but it's sort of it feels a little more in my wheelhouse. So for me, doing an exercise like that, trying to work out, like a different mouthpiece configuration, I'm just kind of like feeling out like what feels different, what do I need to do to make certain things happen and to actually feel good while I'm doing them and to sound the way I want them to sound. So it may not be like a one-to-one translation between me doing those exercises and me being able to play really fast like fusion licks, which is what I'm trying to do to work up to. But it's a step in that direction, just kind of acclimating my body to really that register and the equipment so that I can, if I need to turn up the gas or whatever, I have something I can sort of lean on to where like, okay, I know it feels that easy to play up there if I'm playing this long flowy thing. So I just have to sort of translate that feeling and apply it to when I'm playing this really angular stuff at a, higher dynamic level. So this is in terms of the way I practice, I kind of go back and forth. People say you should only spend 5, maybe 10 minutes on a particular thing and move on. I do understand and believe in sort of brain fatigue and focus fatigue, and I think that's something that should be taken into account. And it helps to sort of take away certain variables if you want to be really meticulous about what you're doing and trying to see like the efficacy of your practice method and what you're hitting. And I may try that at some point. I'm just not kind of doing that now. I may jump to things here and there. I mean, I don't want to spend like half an hour on just one thing or like one bar or whatever, but I can sort of feel when it's getting a little less effective to kind of hammer one thing, and then I'll move on. It might help to hit something related or to think about something related in order to connect. I find that I can internalize something, a concept or a skill or whatever, a little better if I can connect it to something else. That makes it a little more alive in my brain and my body. But sometimes I might do something super disjunct So maybe let's see. I think today I'll try and connect it a little more. So I'm gonna spend a second. Jesus. Let me go ahead and. So I have open a Muse Score project that I've been working on. Let me go ahead and pull that up on the stream. I don't know. I was on Facebook or something, and I heard somebody post a video of some band, some horns playing some like super gnarly like fusion licks, and then I was like, what if I did that? So where's my bass part? Something weird happened. Oh, it just looks different. Interesting. Is that? Oh, okay. I'm like accidentally like messing with my file by touching my screen. Anyway, I wrote this out in MIDI score. I did a little bit of like playing on the horn to see what things would feel like and to like think of something that would make sense to play on trumpet and sound cool. But I also did a lot of it just kind of like hearing it and writing it down, or actually picking up the bass and trying to come up with things that way. But this is super super hard, and some of these might not even be possible for me. I mean, they might be possible for other people. This is certainly like, if someone could sight read this, like, holy shit. But I'm not sure how I want to track it exactly yet. It would make sense to track the first part and then go down from there. But I might actually do it in reverse, just because that might actually be easier. But why don't I play something? Why don't I work on something that has a direct connection to what I was just doing? So there's this line here. I'm just gonna play it so you can hear how MuseScore does it. So this fun little scale that just kind of repeats. And it sounds pretty simple and easy on MuseScore, but obviously it's a little harder to actually do on trumpet. So why don't I turn this into sort of like a vocalese exercise, and I'll start by this is another thing I might do. Like if I find a difficult passage of music in some rep that I'm working on, I'll find a way, like I'll break it down, and if I can just break it down and work on individual things and I isolate what a problem area might be, I'll just do that. Or if it's something where I can like, hey, I can turn this into like an exercise, I'll also do that and sort of like broaden the scope of this one thing in a piece of music that gives me an issue to like this like exercise that I can turn into like part of like a routine, like a fundamental exercise, to sort of connect that to my playing in a broader sense. So this is a pretty simple, I mean, it's just kind of like a 5-note scale thing, so this should be pretty simple to sort of like turn into something you could just repeat. So I'm going to mess around with that a little bit. You got this. What I want that scale to be, actually. What do I have it in the other part? C sharp, E natural. Okay. that's the jump that's going to be tough. Whoops. Okay. So yeah, I'm just kind of getting used to what that feels like, and then connecting it to it descends at the end, but I also just want to connect it to the octave below, so I don't get too caught up in it being like high or anything. Because again, when I'm playing on the shallower mouthpiece, it gives me a hand with that compression, so I don't really need to give it too much to get the notes to speak. So connecting it to the octave below just kind of reminds me like, hey, you don't have to work that hard. Now I like getting that jump between the G and the B flat, or the A sharp is written. Now I kind of like connect all that, so it's like a pretty simple interval, and then just kind of connecting it within the line by doing that little like just sort of expanding that range outward and just kind of connecting everything that way. I did it starting from lower, which makes more sense with what I was just talking about, trying to connect the lower and the higher range. But in the context, the phrase builds up and goes up to the written D and starts coming down. And so being able to get the same sense of connection and flow starting, at the top of the register going down, and not letting myself do anything weird when I'm up there, and then bringing all that when I go down to the register. I mean, it's a very easy thing to do, to sort of like when you're playing high to make it turn it into something completely different. That's why I've always found like it's easier for me to work up to a high note than to just nail it, or come going down to up is something that we spend more time on generally than starting at the top and going down. So it's just kind of a blind spot that needs to be worked out. So in this case, it's kind of the exploration phase where I'm just kind of like, okay, what's the best case in this specific situation where I can like remind myself to connect those things. Obviously, connecting from low to high is something that I'm more comfortable with versus connecting the high to low. So trying to take the thing that I can do and apply it to the thing that I have less success in. But this is just sort of like the sort of discovery phase, I guess. It could be helpful to just, so for example, I could do this. My issue is just hitting that note, and then I could branch out from there. It's getting crazy hot. Hold on. Let the door open and talk for a little bit so I can get some air in here. Whew. All right. So I kind of started by working on this. A lot of times, this is something I picked up from my teacher in college, especially for when it's like these long runs. Basically starting working it back to front. Which I didn't necessarily literally do here. I mean, the phrase ends on the B, the written B an octave below. And so I started by working out in that register and then moving it up. So I didn't necessarily, it's not like I played the phrase backwards or built the phrase starting from the end to the beginning of it. But I sort of applied that concept. So I started that way, and then I'm working on the front end of it, which is starting on that B. And in the context, like, I'm playing stuff in the phrase before, or it's written out, playing stuff in the phrase before. So this is the sort of thing where multiple ways of tackling the issue. Also, sort of trying to connect all parts of the phrase, because like, so if the problem issue is hitting the B, one, working up to it, and then getting that, and then being able to hit it, cold, which not necessarily what I was doing there. It's one of those things where like, yeah, you kind of figure it out as you repeat it, and every subsequent success is kind of just a reinforcing thing, because obviously if I take a sec, it would be a little more difficult to just pick it up and do it now, versus when I was doing it a bunch of times in a row. So the reinforcing is where that part comes in, making that more automatic and executable. And then moving on and connecting it to the line before it. Yeah, I mean, this is literally just me, like, I wrote that, so I knew what that was, what it sounded like, and I knew it would be a challenging thing, but I didn't really think about, like, what exactly would be the minute details of how I would figure out how to play that for real on my instrument versus, letting MuseScore do its thing. So it's just me in real time just sort of figuring out how I would work on that. And basically, I think what I arrived at, essentially what I would do, I might take more time to, I might add a 16th note at a time, depending on how agonizingly I want to do it. But because it's a repeated line, it's like, if you can just play indefinitely, then you're pretty much good to go. And if you could then bring it down, you can then descend that line down to the lower octave, which is what it does in the context of the written music. Then you're pretty much good to go. So breaking it down 16th by 16th may not be super necessary, depending on how you want to spend your time. But that thing of being able to hit the B and hitting it, it's offset by a 16th note, so it comes out on the E of I should say, of 2, beat 2. Boom, boom, ba ba da, boom, ba ba da 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 ba da. And obviously that's, so what I would do is spend time getting that to feel super comfortable at a slower speed, where I feel I can pick up the horn and just do it, and then bringing that up, because I could play that lick. Once I figured it out, like when I was just messing with it without the metronome, it's not super difficult. Once I kind of get the feel for where I want to put everything, so I could bring the temp up, or the tempo up, seemingly pretty easily. But getting that initial entrance is kind of the hard part of that. I'm gonna look for something else in this piece, instead of kind of, well, let me see. I think I understand. Sometimes in practice, like if I'm trying to discover, if I'm in sort of discovery mode of practice, where I'm trying to like think about what I need to work on, I'll spend time figuring out like, how do I work on this thing. I'll spend a little time working on it, but not necessarily like try to complete, like become completely proficient at this one thing right in that one practice session. Sometimes I feel like just discovering what I need to do to work it out is satisfying enough to me, depending on what it is and my temperament and all these things. Right now, when I'm just trying to let my room air out a little bit, I'm willing to look for something else to work on. So there's this earlier lick that is not super hard if you isolate it, but it's the context that it's in that makes it way harder. But I'm just gonna work on getting the the phrase itself ironed out. There's like a little sort of pickup line into it. That's really what makes it hard. But I want to work on the line itself and get that super solidified so that I can connect that pickup into it to hopefully make it a little more just something to sort of like, if my body knows till I'm leading into this next thing, then it should, sort of make it easier to understand what I need to do to get the previous line in shape. So I'm going to show you guys that. So I have all these like crazy 16th note things that aren't super crazy until you try to play them at. Originally I was going to say 156, but I'm trying to dial it back, the tempo, where it still has the energy but is doable. So this line is sort of based on something that happens in the beginning of the piece, and it's sort of related to something that happens later as well. But it's just this simple thing that's sort of a sequence, but not exactly a sequence. This is one, I messed with the rhythms, and two, the intervals aren't exact, particularly for the other parts. It's sort of based around the melody in the first part, but the other three trumpet parts are kind of doing something totally different. So let's just listen to that. Yeah, and the way music score treats accents is pretty wild. So I'm not going to play it like that. And I have a lot of articulations and stuff written in the part. These are things that I might pencil in a part myself. I'm not trying to necessarily super dictate what anyone who plays this would do. A lot of times for like jazz and things in that idiom, I leave a lot of the articulation out because I leave, generally that's how charts are. It's kind of like, the player knows, what they would do in this case. Like if I see running 8ths or 16ths, I'll just be like, well, they just do like sort of a bebop articulation unless they want to change specific things. But in this case, I did it all out in the score just so, because I'm not going to print these out. I'm going to read them off of my computer. So I'm just having these articulations written in, so when I actually eventually go to record this myself, I don't have to think about what articulation I'm going to use. I already figured it out and know what I'm going to do so that everything sounds, lines up style-wise. But I'm thinking about actually changing this part. I'm not sure yet. Not too much. Keep the same idea, but sort of change a little bit of it out. But for now, I'll sort of work on it as is, and maybe they'll give me some insight into what exactly I want to change. So I'm just gonna start. I'm gonna do this. It'll be obvious how I break it down. Maybe I'll keep the music on the page so you can kind of see how what I'm doing is different than what exactly is being written, so that I can sort of work my way to what is actually on the page. Closing the door so I can cook myself some more. Now that you kind of get an idea of what the music looks like, I'm gonna go into sort of like the rep mode. And I like when I could see other people play, seeing physically what they're doing with their face and their fingers and everything like that. So that's why I'm switching back and forth. I need another quick breather. Whew. Yeah. Sometimes, especially when I'm working something like that, um, I find these days, I've gotten a little more comfortable in the upper register in terms of like it doesn't feel like it's beating me up too much if I'm just playing it something like that pretty relaxed scenario. But I also don't want to overdo it, especially when I'm working on a mouthpiece I don't play as much. And in fact, at this point, I would stop and then take a bit of a break, even if it's just 5-10 minutes, and then do something else. Kind of like when you're playing pick. Like the first time when you're working on learning how to play piccolo, you don't want to play piccolo for like 3 hours because you try to pick up your trumpet the next day and it's gonna be like you never played it in your life, because it's just a totally different physical experience. So teaching your body to do one thing, you have to sort of delineate and make sure that it understands that these things are different. But you kind of see what I was getting at with that. Just kind of feeling relaxed in that phrase, getting the whole phrase to feel connected and letting it flow, making sure that what I'm doing up there in those ah-yahs, that it feels like it's connected to what I'm doing in the staff, that it all feels connected as a phrase, that I'm writing my air and using my air efficiently, and then because it's all written out to be articulated, trying to connect, making sure what I'm doing with my tongue at the front of the note is not getting too much in the way of the air. And that's sort of what I do, my focus with the Clark that I was doing earlier. There's something I saw Tom Hooten doing on his 100 days of practice thing, where he was like blowing the airstream, feeling it on his pinky, and just sort of seeing what articulation, what he's doing with the tongue, disrupts the air the least in order to get it the smoothest. And obviously you can, there are different things you might want to do stylistically, but sort of understanding that, I think, is important. How to get your air out of the way of, or how to get your tongue out of the way of the airstream. And doing it on the pinky was something that was interesting for me, because I've seen, I've done it on the palm of my hand and stuff before, but if you really think about it, the entrance you have in trumpet mouthpiece is super small. It's even smaller than your pinky, the surface of your pinky. It's like trying to blow through a nail. So in terms of efficiency, I don't want to go too far in really, really clamping down my aperture, but understanding that it's a pretty narrow target, and so you have to be very coordinated. It's all about coordination. But yeah, making sure that my articulation is not getting away with the airstream. So I spent some time figuring that out. Again, it's sort of a discovery mode. I could just be I'm going to turn the metronome down and just work on that at a low speed. But for certain things, I want to really make sure that I'm starting in a good place. So I'll spend that time connecting the upper octave to lower octave and connecting the entire phrase before I get into the meat and potatoes of, I'm just going to practice what this phrase is at a slow tempo until it feels good, and then bump up the tempo. I feel like there should be a step between you analyzing, at least for me, there's usually a step between me analyzing, okay, this is something that's hard, what's hard about it, what do I need to work on, and then actually just doing the reps. That'll eventually get it to feel, second nature, or, doable and achievable consistently. So I'll take the time in the discovery mode to sort of make sure I know how to make it feel good, and then go from there. And then as I hit it again, whatever I needed to do, maybe I'll do it or I'll do it less. But I feel like a lot of teaching your body and teaching your brain how to recall these things is juxtaposing them with things that feel simple and easy, and then not necessarily using them as a crutch, but if you have to recall that feeling, that's something that you could do simply until what you're working on is more in your wheelhouse, and then just allowing it to be a little more automatic that way. But yeah, just giving myself a break and talking. Let me move my microphone a little more. Maybe turn up my volume so I don't have to hold it right up to my face. But yeah, I labeled this stream "Let's Practice and Brainstorm." I didn't expect anyone to come in here and like comment or talk or anything like that, but definitely in the future, it'll be great to have conversations with people about how they're adapting. I wanna on my channel, my streams, I want to highlight a lot of different things that I think are very important. That are maybe, the future of music is personally important, and I think, of course, art and things like that are very essential to our species and things like that. But there are other things that I think are more immediately important, that I've been trying to highlight and talk about, and I'm going to spend time doing that. But I also want to see what people are doing, because this industry, it's changed so much in the last 10 years even. But this is going to sort of, I think if people like myself, like I've dabbled in the internet and the digital realm, but that was never my bread and butter. But I think it's going to have to sort of become that for a lot of us. So thinking about how people who are used to doing things in the analog space and doing gigs and teaching and things like that, how are we going to transition to doing a lot of things more remotely, a lot of more things in the digital space, and different investments we're going to have to make, and if we can even do that, because I'm okay for now. I'm in a pretty privileged position of being pretty safe and pretty comfortable, and able to focus on how I'm going to do this transition. But many others are going to be a lot more hard hit, obviously not just in music, but in general. So maybe I won't dwell on that too much now. I think, the stream's been going for about an hour and a half. I could probably honestly wrap it up here. It always feels different when you're working on things in front of another person. Like, I've been in situations where I've had to like warm up in a lesson or like practice in a lesson, where you're not just like, playing something and have it being critiqued, but it's like, I'm working this out, and you approach it very differently when someone's in front of you, and it's almost like you're overly analytical and methodical. But sometimes it can be helpful, sometimes it's overkill. So in this space where it's like, yeah, I'm doing this with understanding that it's not going to be perfect, and I'm willing to be a little bit subpar in front of, whatever my audience may be. But you still are aware of how long you're spending on something, or if something's not working out when someone else is watching. So it's a helpful exercise for myself, and if there's at least one other musician or someone who's working on something technical who's watching, can sort of get ideas from this. It'd be nice to have, as I do more of this, to have more of an audience so I can have more of a conversation with people. But I intend to have more conversations with peers, just, for my own personal fulfillment, doing more of that in the future. But this was fun to do, other than having to close my door and have the oxygen slowly deplete in here as the temperature rises, and but that was cool. I don't have my socials up on these streams, but LOKK9, if you Google that, you'll get pretty much everything everywhere I am. Also on the about page of my YouTube, it'll be there. I'm pretty sure everyone who's watching are people that I personally know very well anyway, so they can always contact me whenever they want. On the off chance anyone else does and wants to talk about some of these things, or comments, or question, or whatever, that'd be a fun thing to do. But trying to get some oxygen back in my brain. But I'm gonna wrap up and get ready to have dinner and chill out. Again, Thursday stream talking about a little bit about history of labor organizing and how workers are the lifeblood of society and who a worker is and what that means, and more things to consider going forward as we ride out this pandemic and think about how this can be a learning moment for society in general. But yeah, that'll do it for me. Until Thursday, everybody, I will see you all then. Peace.